Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Crown Report. My name is Brittany. It is Wednesday, November 12th. We are a day behind, but there is so much royal news to go over for sure. We have a lot of questions, you could say, about what the future for the York girls looks like, especially Beatrice, as she's come under the spotlight a little bit this week because of an event she had in Saudi Arabia and these sorts of things. And many people are wondering and questioning why Beatrice is still allowed to use her title. Should she have her title? How has she perhaps used her father's connections to help her in her various business endeavors? It's an interesting thought. So we are going to discuss a little bit of that today. We also have Prince William getting off, of course, his tour of Brazil for the Earthshot Prize, and some comments that you could say may potentially eventually get him into perhaps a little bit of political hot water. And it's definitely something worthwhile for discussion. And then we also have, of course, more on King Juan Carlos as he continues to do interviews and various things on his book, and sort of being a disgruntled ex-king who's also trying to act like he's very, very benevolent. And all he wants to do is serve the Spanish people from his oceanside island that only certain people can visit, only accessible by boat, to keep the Spanish media out, because the Spanish media might ask him questions he doesn't want to answer. So we are going to go over a little bit of that. There's some interesting questions being raised about the Maria's case. We also have an update about the alleged, you could say, don't know if you want to call it an affair, but the alleged discussion over now King Frederick and a woman named Casanova is her last name, and whether or not they had a little bit of a tryst at some point. And then we also have something interesting from Princess Esmeralda of Belgium. And we do have video of Catherine and Queen Camilla both at various events, looking both gracious and gorgeous. And Camilla is definitely getting a bit of the Hollywood treatment. And Catherine is sharing with us a bit of George's various passions. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And we do have, let's begin here. We have a couple of things, a little bit of super chats here to talk about. So we have Lizzie B says, remember to hit the like button for the Crown Report. Why, thank you, Lizzie. And also gifted one Royal News Network membership. We have Carol who gifted one as well. And then said in a super chat, King and Conqueror is on US-sided Amazon. So that is a series about William the Conqueror and Harold Godwin's son. So that's sort of interesting around the death of Edward Confessor and how we got the modern line of British royals. So definitely want to check that out here. So guys, now that we have that, let's go over and begin with Princess Beatrice. And I will say, first of all, I like the York girls. I don't really have an issue with them like some do, but I also understand the questions that linger, sort of the interesting and somewhat concerning aspects of their sort of peripheral roles in royalty, like the land of royalty. So let's begin here with this one, because Beatrice has done a couple of charitable events and also one connected to her job. So the first one we have here is Beatrice has become the deputy patron of a charity, and that is the Outward Bound Trust. And so Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, we also have a little bit of update on that too, had supported for decades before his resignation as patron in 2019. And so Beatrice has become deputy patron, while the Duke of Edinburgh has become the royal patron. So the charity, which helps children develop lifelong skills through adventure, said Beatrice had served as a trustee for 6 years. So this is not a picture of Beatrice at the event, but I do want to kind of share a perspective here and clarify an understanding, because I know we will see various things and people argue that, oh, Beatrice is representing the crown. She's not really. She's actually representing herself, because she is not a working royal. And what we mean by working royals is that they are royals who directly work on behalf of the state. So this is Charles, Camilla, Catherine, and William. We have the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. We have Princess Anne, the Duke of Kent, who does very, very few engagements, in addition to Princess Alexandra of Kent, who is his sister. We also have the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. So we have a very short, I would say, probably less than 10 or a little bit about 10 royals actually on the working royal roster. And some of those, especially the Duke of Kent, is mostly kind of retired, and Princess Alexandra especially. So there is definitely a gut in terms of who is a working royal, but Beatrice and any royals connected to the larger royal family can be patrons of something. So this means that yes, they are royals and they can be patrons or something, but they don't fulfill that role as an official royal patron. It's sort of semantics, but there is definitely a difference. And so Beatrice has her own job, her own work life, her own family life, and yet she can also volunteer and be a patron of an organization if she wants to. And I understand how, again, people have criticisms here, but I don't find that to be particularly problematic because it seems like she's definitely kind of taking an example from her grandmother and grandfather in this way. And so I think that's perfectly fine. And then she's also done another role recently here. So she went to another charity, and this was at the Bourne Research Laboratories at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital on Monday afternoon. So she went there and is kind of supporting a charity because this is where her daughter Athena was born, and was born premature earlier this year. And so that was definitely obviously something that she is connected to. She's also connected to another charity that helps moms with babies who are born quite premature. So it's her first public charity appearance since her father was stripped of his titles. And then also Princess Beatrice was the host of something, and we will get there. And so speaking of Bourne, which funds research into preventing premature births. And so this might be the organization that Beatrice went to their gala earlier this year, now that I think about it. And so described the work as incredibly close and personal to me following the early arrival of my second daughter. So Athena was born at the start of the year, weighing 4 pounds, 5 ounces, with Beatrice previously writing that she was so tiny it took more than a few weeks for the tears of relief to finally dry. And so she has become sort of connected with this organization. And she was joined by Good Mornings Britain's weather preventer, Laura Tobin, who had her own daughter who was born premature. They met with scientists, clinicians, leading Bourne's research, including projects investigating the cause of preterm labor, the role of inflammation in pregnancy, and the development of new treatments to help prevent babies from being born too early. In a statement released to coincide with the visit, Beatrice said, "The work that Bourne is undertaking is something that is incredibly close to me following the early arrival of my second daughter. Today's visit was not only insightful, but has given me so much hope for pregnant mothers in the UK that this topic is being taken incredibly seriously. As a patron of Bourne, I'm so grateful for the scientists and clinicians who took time today to show me the advances they are making to reduce the risks to expectant moms and babies." And so she also said, "As a parent who's experienced the uncertainty of premature birth and how worrying it can be, today's visit was deeply personal. The research here gives me hope for the future, that one day fewer families will have to face what ours did. The dedication of everyone at Bourne to finding answers and preventing prematurity is truly inspiring." And I find this to be great that Beatrice is doing, because one of the things is some people believe that the York girls should just go over and be in a corner and not make any waves and not do anything. And to me, that's not actually the best path forward. The best path forward for them is exactly what Beatrice is doing, which is basically going around and continuing the work that she was already doing, kind of really not taking a step back and just sort of going along and doing the things that she feels passionate about. Because Beatrice has time. She has opportunities. She might want to help support the work that other people are doing. And I think that is a really, really good thing. Like, should she just sit in a corner of a room and just not do anything, or just not? I mean, that just doesn't make a ton of sense. And yes, she is not a working royal, so she's not a royal patron in that way, but we do have a smaller royal roster. And so if she's able to fulfill some of that role, take on some of these charities, not in an official capacity, but just as an extension of the desire to do charity, I think that's perfectly appropriate. However, there is also a bit of concern as well, which I understand because this remains, again, a complex issue. Because what I want to reemphasize is that their parents have made terrible decisions throughout their lives, and there might be a possibility that the girls are involved in some of that. But there is no hard evidence that they're connected to all of that. And I am very much against the idea of, because their parents have been demonized and part of this witch hunt or whatever, extending that to their children, because no child should bear the burden of their parents' sins. I think that's really, really an important thing to consider here. And with that said, though, we do have Princess Beatrice hosts a tea party for super rich dignitaries in Saudi as her disgraced father is stripped of his titles and booted out of Royal Lodge. So apparently, Princess Beatrice was in Riyadh, I guess, during some of all this upheaval with Andrew. And so the event was held at the Riyadh Ritz-Carlton. And so it's known for powerful royals, tycoons, and ministers. And one of the things you got from Andrew Lowney's book, which I'm sure is incredibly true, is that especially in the Middle East, if you are a royal, that really does talk and that really does move things more than just about everything else. Because sometimes some people are not that, let's say, impressed with royalty or not that interested. At the same time, again, it's kind of a little bit because Andrew played in a lot of these circles, moved in a lot of these circles, and probably had a lot of backdoor dealings with some of these circles. Again, people are a bit of concern. And so there was, I guess, a crackdown in 2017 of Saudi's old guards. And some of the scenes happened at the Ritz-Carlton. So that's sort of interesting. But Beatrice was there for an event last week billed as Afternoon Tea with Princess Beatrice of York. And that is still her title. That is still her name. And while I think, given the circumstances, she might dial some of that back, at the time, I think everything around her father, is my understanding, was happening. So if this event was put into motion before then, like, there was not too much she could do to change it. So there's a lot of, I guess, concern in some circles that she might be sort of resuming her father's role as a trade envoy. She has a role in a company called Future Investment Initiative, and she rubs shoulders sometimes with some of the richest men on the planet. So this was a picture of her at the hotel. It looks like she was probably actually, kind of messaging with her family around that time. It would be my thought. This is sort of the invitation. It's called the Lioness Collective as part of it, putting it on. So obviously here's Andrew and the Saudi royal family. There are a lot of them. So and if you go back to 2008, and again, a lot of this is in Andrew Lowney's book, speculation began that 19-year-old Beatrice was being prepped for such a role as maybe a successor to her father's role as trade envoy, as she went on a 14-day tour with him to Abu Dhabi and Egypt at the taxpayer's expense, because she still had a bodyguard at that time. So the cost might have been upwards of £40,000, but she didn't perform any public engagements. Now, again, some of that criticism, I understand it now, but at the time it probably wasn't, again, a super big deal. And let's say if George goes and follows along with his father on an engagement, and as his father is doing a tour or something, in that role, George doesn't really, he would have security too. So I find that to be a bit of a misnomer, because again, sometimes with the current eyesight we have now, we criticize things in the past that sort of made sense. And so in 2011, it was reported that Beatrice was given expensive pieces of jewelry on another trip to Abu Dhabi with Andrew by their royal hosts. Now, this is generally how these countries interact with others. So they give lavish gifts. They have a ton of money. So they'll give lavish gifts. And yes, they hope for something in return. But at the same time, this is sort of how these dealings work. Obviously, we have Catherine, who has this diamond and ruby set that she really hasn't worn since 2011. The question is, of course, is that particular jewelry set connected to, let's say, Saudi Arabia? And that's why she doesn't wear it very much. We also have Meghan Markle with her alleged blood diamonds. So that massive diamond earring set that she wore to Charles's birthday party and in during their tour of the South Pacific, Australia and that sort of thing. People found out later that that was actually a gift from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who was involved in the assassination plot of the journalist. And so people have started calling those earrings basically Meghan's blood diamonds, and we haven't seen her wear them really since. And we also know that she asked her staff to lie about their provenance. So this is, though, a long-standing tradition. The Queen, Princess Diana, Catherine, I'm sure, have all gotten massive gifts of diamonds from these families. So that's not super unusual. So many years later, Beatrice is in the Ritz-Carlton lobby, and the invitation cards we have detailed. So she arrived in Saudi Arabia. She was treated very much as a VIP by the assembled royals, energy bosses, and high-powered bankers, with podcaster Sunil Sharma posing for a selfie with her in a hotel. So what is exactly her role? The line is collective, is, I guess they don't really specify here, a space where drive meets action and hard work turns into real results, about hustling and these sorts of things. So a lot of, I would say, questionable, not so clear perspectives on this kind of outing and what she's doing. So, in regard to this, because of everything going on with Andrew, the question of the gifts that she received, through him or because of him or whatever. And since a lot of that was associated with the Middle East for Andrew, like a lot of, you could say, I would say most of his wheeling and dealing back dealing for himself probably happened within the Middle East and sort of Central Asia region. So we're talking about I think one of the places was like Turkmenistan, he was in Armenia, I think it was. And so he has sort of dealt with these somewhat peripheral figures. And so I think for Beatrice's future, and again, my understanding when I read the article is that this was she was there and we were told she wasn't in the country at the time everything happened with Andrew, and this is probably where she was working, is I would suggest to her, just to keep herself kind of above the fray, is to not really use her title too much and probably somewhat distance herself from this region of the world, because it's just the connections there are a little suspect, and I don't think it kind of benefits her super well in terms of the eyes of the public. And I think that is the important critical thing, because it's not that you're doing X, Y, and Z. It's how maybe it looks at the time. This, obviously thinking of Harry and Meghan going to Kris Jenner's birthday party on the weekend of Remembrance Sunday and the Festival of Remembrance. That was a stupid move, not because they went to the party. If you want to go to a party, go to a party. Who cares? But it was more of the weekend, and they knew it was going to be bad optically, but they went at it anyways and then sort of backtracked towards the end. So I would say that I would offer to Beatrice and to Eugenie is to tread very carefully. Tread very carefully here, as everything is sort of being sussed out with their father, because they don't want to be dragged down into all of this. They want to try to remain above the fray as much as possible while still being honoring to their parents, because this is not the case where you shut, the door on your father and you never come back. Although I'm sure that was somewhat in their minds at many points. He is their father. Sarah is their mother. They need to be gracious to them, as children should be to their parents. Again, I criticize Harry a lot for not being gracious and loving to his dad. And so I respect Beatrice and Eugenie for, despite everything, still having a relationship with their parents, and seemingly a good one. That is good for them. But at the same time, too, optically, sometimes you just need to be not seen with someone publicly. There's a ways to make sure that you can go to your parents' house and not get things that come back out. And like all of this stuff sort of works together. And that's why you need, I think, for Beatrice and Eugenie, if they don't have a really, really strong PR team, they should have one right now, just because you want to avoid stepping in it. It's very easy for them. And I am not of the persuasion, like some people are, that people need to do a fact-finding mission into their finances. I think we'll find things in every royal family that people aren't particularly happy about. That's just sort of the nature of people who are obscenely wealthy. And people will take anything and sort of run with it. It's best that people don't go into a fact-finding mission and that they can avoid that as much as possible. If there is a solid reason to, if something comes up via Andrew that's very, very strong, then yes, I will reevaluate at that time. But I disagree in fact-finding missions, because what people are looking for is they're looking for something that they can try to tank somebody with. And sometimes that is absolutely 100% a true case that needs to be developed and cultivated and these sorts of things. But at the same time, people can twist, let's say innocent things, or let's say something's borderline, they can twist that into something so nefarious that it sort of kills anything else. And so I am fully against that. And so hopefully she is able to navigate this well, because I do like Beatrice. I do like Eugenie. I don't have the hatred that some people do towards them. I'm like, hey, if you want to have a relationship with Harry, that's your prerogative. I would say it's probably not a great idea, but family is family. And I think there is a way sometimes for people to develop, like to keep a good open relationship with someone. But at the same time, people are looking for anything to drag them down. So again, the smart thing to do is not to give them any ammunition. Avoid any ammunition, and they'll, I think, go through this well. Because I did want to point something out too, which is that apparently, this is according to a royal butler, and this was in the Express, so I don't know how true it is, but Charles remains very close to his niece, Princess Beatrice. And they specifically mentioned Beatrice, and I think, and I would imagine that's quite true. And I think that is lovely. I hope he has a good relationship with them, and I hope she is able to maintain that good relationship with her uncle. I think that's a really, really good thing. So Beatrice and Eugenie, they have this great opportunity. But again, it's all in how you manage it. And they could either manage it well or manage it poorly. And it remains to be seen kind of where everything will go. But seems to be going pretty well so far. But again, Beatrice has got to tread carefully here. And when it comes to Andrew, we do have a couple of updates. Number one, although I think it was supposed to go on today, but I haven't really seen much reporting on it, which is that the MPs were going to debate aspects of Prince Andrew's Royal Lodge situation, which I feel like is kind of backwards now, because it's like, well, he's kind of sort of done with that. But they are going to debate it because now he is a private citizen. So the MPs can't really drag a royal into some of their discussions. That's sort of, no, it didn't seem like it was against the law, but it's sort of something they don't do to criticize the royals. But at the same time, since Andrew has been stripped of everything, now they can have these sorts of discussions. I think it's kind of a little too late, too little too late type of situation, because obviously Andrew is going to be moving out of Royal Lodge. Like, this is where we're going. But I understand at the same time them wanting to really figure out some aspects of the finances, how he was able to stay there. My big question is, of course, is that if he wasn't able, let's say, to maintain the upkeep of Royal Lodge, how was he able to stay there for so long? Because I guess apparently what's being discussed right now is that he would have gotten, based on how his release was arranged, to force him out of it early, the Crown Estate would have to pay him around £500,000. However, because of all the updates that are needed and the management of the property wasn't kept up the way it should have been, it looks like he won't really recoup any of that. So that is sort of an interesting piece of discussion as well. Hopefully they don't go too much into a fact-finding expedition, because again, I feel like some of this becomes a witch hunt, and people are looking for somebody to crucify, and they'll find them if they want to. And or they'll sort of make something up or really, really twist something to benefit them. And of course, that's sort of the price they pay sometimes. And the second bit of Andrew news, which is also interesting to consider, is that when it comes to his name, it has officially been announced that he will be Andrew Mountbatten hyphen Windsor. So he's originally just Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and that I guess is his preferred styling. However, and again, this goes to the idea that stripping Andrew of everything wasn't fully thought out, that it was a reactionary tactic rather than something proactive. And they sort of rushed it because what they've said is that according to precedents that Queen Elizabeth set up, Andrew should be Andrew Mountbatten hyphen Windsor. So that is officially how he will be styled in the future, in case you are curious. So that sort of wraps up a bit of our York business. So I, again, feel very, very sorry for the girls. They should not be trashed just because of their parents. Yet at the same time, they may get a little too involved in aspects of their parents' lives that maybe they shouldn't have, or their parents' dealings. So that wraps up that section. And next, we're going to move on to Prince William. And the sort of the question is he maybe stepping in a little bit of political hot water? And so I found this sort of to be an interesting question I thought of as I read through this New Times piece. Prince William tells big business to step up in climate battle, chiding them for falling short on green issues. And so this is sort of one of the things that can be a little dicey about the Earthshot Prize and some aspects of the green initiatives around, is that not everybody agrees with them. Not everybody believes the same things. And sometimes people come at these as if everybody should be on the same page. Why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z? And that's just not a business's priority. They also have to think about their bottom line. The sort of the problem generally with climate issues is that there are so many, there's an infinite number of factors here that nobody can fully control. And so because of that, you either have to come up with a global government that all agrees to do the same thing, or you have to sort of recognize that nobody is ever going to be on the same page about this. You can make some strides, but not probably really making all that much of a difference. So we have still, I do want to get to the quotes. And it says, Royal Source says, during his visit to Brazil, the Prince of Wales raised his concern about the lack of meaningful support from global businesses in tackling the climate crisis when he met with Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero. He believes that major companies are still not doing nearly enough. He wants to see bold leadership in the private sector, and honestly, many businesses are still reluctant to get involved. Even when some are making genuine progress, they're rarely talking about it. There are positive companies such as IKEA, Uber, and the food giant Compass Group are showing real leadership and deserve credit, investing in Earthshot Prize finalists, but far too many others are still falling short, and it's time for them to step up to the plate. So this is obviously, this Times is a very reputable source, and they're speaking on behalf of William in many ways. But this is sort of treading into dangerous water here. And the dangerous water is that the companies can come back and go, you are a prince. You have no clue how to run a business. How dare you speak to us about any of this? That is how some people will react. That's just reality here. And the fact of the matter is, too, again, so many different factors, manufacturing, cost issues, like so many critical things that are outside of a lot of companies' control. And at the same time, too, it's like, okay, do we risk, destroying our business to fulfill whatever green initiative some people want us to do? And that is something that I think generally will turn some people off. So William, I feel like, even though he's not saying this directly, somebody on his behalf, it feels very obviously stated in a very controlled way, and it's from the Times, so this is somebody likely very close to William. But I would suggest not going down this path, because I think Earthshot Prize succeeds best when it's just highlighting people who are doing great initiatives and these sorts of things, and not really getting mired in the politics and the business side of it. Because if you present a good business angle to a company that saves it money, time, and energy, they will 100% go down that path. But if you come at them with going, you need to change this now because I want you to change this now, they're like, but you're not running the company. I am. I have stockholders to think of. I have investors to think of. I have a board to think of, like all these different things. That is, it's just like an automatic, everybody should agree with this on different. And the reality is, there will be nobody who agrees 100% on all aspects of this. And I think more focused on the positive of the Earthshot is better than trying to criticize companies for not doing what William thinks is enough. Because there's a lot of very much different perspectives on this issue. This is not a global, everybody agrees on this issue. And there's never going to be that. There will never be anywhere on the planet where everybody 100% agrees on the same issue. Like, you would love to say, oh, everybody agrees murder is bad. That's just not the case, though. As humans, we're too variable for that. And so the other interesting aspect of this, the Earthshot Prize, is that William plans to next year go to India. In a sign of his determination to engage with the world's biggest polluters, India, the most populous nation in the world with more than 1.4 billion people, is the world's third biggest polluter after China and America. The country is responsible for about 8% of global carbon emissions, with its coal as its primary power source, but has to set a goal of reducing emissions by 50% by 2030. And for the economy to be net zero by 2070, neither Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, nor President Xi of China attended COP30 Leader Summit last year. So this is where William is potentially getting into some potentially political and international relations hot water. So when it comes to the perspective of China and India, very much they're trying to keep up with the West. And they don't have the infrastructure yet. They don't have the development yet, because obviously the West started with the pollution first. You know, in the Industrial Revolution and everything, they were burning coal like crazy. And so now we get to the point where other countries are starting to catch up, and they're going through their own industrial revolution. And it's kind of difficult to say, oh, you must change it because, you know, obviously we did it first. So they're like, well, if you guys do it, it's our turn to do it now. And you have so many things to consider there, especially India's relationship with the UK is very tenuous due to historical connections and these sorts of things. And some of the colonialism obviously leaves a very deep wound. And so, like, I'm a bit hesitant about India being potentially the next host, or the desire to utilize the Earthshot Prize to move politically in these sorts of issues, because this would require political policies to change. And I don't think William is going to get what he wants out of that, because India might give him, obviously, they would meet with him. They'd give him, like, obviously have good discussions with him and these sorts of things. And they're probably not going to do any of it. China for sure is not going to do any of it. And he risks somewhat developing a tense relationship with India over this that might impact the British government. And overall, one of the things that is challenging, I feel like, about general, like, the people who are very, very passionate about environmental issues and these sorts of things, and very much sometimes it's people in the upper echelon of society. Other people are like, I can't pay my bills. My house is too cold because I can't heat it. I don't have enough money for food. I don't have enough money for transportation. Like, there are so many dinner table issues that people aren't going to really care about this. And I feel like, especially in India, that's going to be a huge factor. They're like, well, the prince is talking about this, but hey, I can't feed my family of 6. I don't care what he has to say. That is a perspective that people will have. And so, yes, you will have kind of both sides playing, but this is very, very much an issue where I feel like, especially China, maybe not as much India, but especially China, is has no desire to do any of this until they want to do it. And you can't force them to. You can have meetings with them and they'll give you the time of day, but they'll be like, well, we've got to make money. We want to be the most powerful country on earth. And at least when environmental issues come into play, I always think as a historian, this is the eternal truth of the world. Everybody's in it for themselves. This is sort of the eternal truth of life. Most people are in it for themselves. And so these governments and everyone will always think about themselves over, let's say, a more globalist type of issue. Now, obviously there are grades of that and these sorts of things, but sometimes it's great to think of the common denominator of everything is always going to be most likely or deal with everybody with the idea, especially in global politics, that they're all in it for themselves. They have their own agenda, they have their own ideals, they have all these sorts of things that have nothing to do with what you want. And they're going to do what they want and ignore what you want. So that's just something to consider. And Carol mentioned as well here, which is very true. China obviously has huge hunting, like there's a lot of interest in China for ivory, which has very much driven poaching in Africa. I mean, William can definitely talk to them about that, but I just still don't think that'll change either. It's just very, very sad. As humans, we are all deeply broken and we all do things all the time that we shouldn't be doing. And that's just sort of the unfortunate reality of life. So this will be very interesting, I feel like, but it makes me a little nervous because I feel like we're dipping our toes into a bit of hot political water here. And I think for the Earthshot Prize, I think it was the first 2 years, I feel like interest was really strong, but I do feel like it's somewhat starting to wane a bit. And I don't know. We shall see. I wonder if it would be better. I wonder if it would be better in London or something all the time. I think moving around the world actually sort of diminishes it a little bit, if I'm being quite honest. I think having something that's in one place, like you always know you can go and see it or something, I feel like sometimes that's a little bit of a better angle to something. Like I always know you can always know it's like the second Saturday in June is going to be Trooping the Color. So if I know I go there, I'm going to see a royal. So anyways, that is sort of something to think about. And I know not everybody likes to think about those things, but for me, it's always very important to frame royals within the reality and the constraints of their role. And that is a reality and constraint of William's role, especially as he is on potentially the fast track to become king. And he has to be careful in some of those relations because he does have the power and the ability, whether or not he thinks he's doing good or not, to actually damage some of those relationships unintentionally and just even with the best of intentions. And so sometimes I think it's kind of a bit always approach these things with a bit of caution, understanding that yeah, they're probably really not going to do anything or do something to the desires that you have. And so it's just one of those things. So let's move on to another topic of discussion, which is of course is the very sad king that is Juan Carlos. Oh my goodness. So he has given an interview to Ola. So I had to sign up to Ola and I had to put into Google Translate what was men and women in like the little drop down thing. And to sort of share with you guys a bit of this interview that he did. And it shares a little bit about the environment he's living in right now, how he's basically been sheltered by Abu Dhabi. And this again is an issue of a king who has left his country and is still like again, I get so many like hairy kind of feels from him. So his book is called Reconciliation. And so this is his property in Abu Dhabi because the big question is how much money does he have? Because very much like Andrew, it's sort of been kind of implied that he's been willing and dealing behind the scenes when he's been, supposedly working on behalf of Spain and has hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars tied up somewhere. And so he has made his home here, although he was born in Rome, which I did not know, and lived in Switzerland, Portugal, and Spain. But he says, I carry Spain in my heart. And he talks about he has friends and visitors. Prince Louis of Luxembourg apparently is visiting him, which I found very interesting. I meant to go and like research more about how they developed a relationship, but I'm not quite sure. So his daughters, Infanta Elena and Infanta Cristina, do visit him. And I want to be clear as well when it comes to Juan Carlos and why his daughters visit him is he's the one with all the money. So they're visiting him for the money because there was a big scandal because he was going to set up basically like a tax shelter for them. And so that, like a trust, so that they could get paid even after he dies and stuff. And so everybody was like, where's this money coming from? Because Spain is not known as a monarchy for rolling in cash. It's not. And so he also has his grandson, Felipe Juan Brolian de Marcharlar. Terrible pronunciations. You'll have to apologize. I have to apologize. And so he lived in Abu Dhabi for a time. And I guess it was sort of because he was getting into a bit of trouble. And so he went to live with his grandpa, who also has a lot of trouble. His wife, of course, still lives in Spain, apparently with their 7 dogs. So he calls her Queen Sofia, who he cheated on numerous times. Again, he's a well-known philanderer, apparently has had relations with thousands of women, it has been reported at the high end. And he heaps praise on her, even though she won't live with him anymore, basically saying, she has no equal in my life and will remain so, even though our paths have diverged since my departure from Spain. She continues to be the mother of my children, an extraordinary queen, and a fundamental and irreplaceable emotional anchor. Sophie is an exceptional woman of integrity, kindness, rigor, dedication, and benevolence. She is the embodiment of nobility of spirit. She doesn't like me to call her a great professional, but Spain could not have had a more devoted and irreproachable queen. We are different, but we share the same sense of duty. If by different, he means he likes to cheat a lot and she didn't, there is a difference there. I will admit. And so he claims that his only hope right now is to not embarrass his son, King Felipe VI, after he abdicated. I would argue that he hasn't really matched that very much. And so when it comes to his new location he lives at, he wanted no war, no legal proceedings forced me to do so. I decided to leave as to not hinder the proper functioning of the crown or to interfere with my son's duties as sovereign. There were multiple investigations pending against him. So that is why he chose a destination further away from Italy, where he was born, Switzerland, where he spent his childhood, Portugal, where he spent his youth, or France, whose language he speaks. A discreet island under the radar so as no one bothers him. He said, to help my son, I looked for a place where journalists from my country couldn't easily find me. The location is secret, accessible only by boat. The last time a Spanish journalist came, the local authorities imprisoned him. I had to intervene to get them out, he told the French press. And of course, guys, this is very concerning because he is a former monarch who has basically said that, like, he's trying to keep the press away. He doesn't want them to question him, which is what they're trying to do, question him. What is actually going on here? Like, that's what people deserve to know. And he is preventing that sort of investigation from happening by running away and sheltering, I'm sure, his millions upon millions of dollars that he's probably somewhat squeezed from everything. And so I guess he says, kings don't cry. It's a matter of dignity. His tears flowed for his father, who died in 1993, because his father was supposed to be king before him, but Francisco Franco, the dictator, went with Juan Carlos. And so he says, I've never stopped serving Spain and the Spanish people. That's how my father raised me. Of course, like, if you're in Abu Dhabi trying to avoid the press and accountability for your actions, you're not serving people. You're only serving yourself. Again, let's be fully honest. So the author of the book, or the person who helped him write it, said, I discovered a sensitive man, the fragility behind the political beast, but also the aridity of a king's life and his terrible loneliness. Together in this book, they have looked back on his childhood, torn between two countries, Portugal, where his parents lived, and Spain, where in 1948, Franco oversaw his education, and two diametrically opposed figures, the dictator and the Count of Barcelona, which is his father. Shaken undoubtedly, he has, but as he says, I knew where my duty lay. And so again, I feel like this is very much an effort to reframe history and to seeing him as a better figure before his death. So he recounts his journey. He has no regrets or remorse. And then these are his children. So Felipe's in the middle. I want to say this is Elena and this is Christina. And so what I found sort of interesting here is that he really, I think, wants to have more of a relationship with his granddaughter, Princess Leonor, because he says here that he would really like her to visit him. Like any grandfather, he longs for his granddaughter to finally come and visit him. The last great witness of the transition to democracy, will then be able to tell his story to her and how, thanks to him, she embodies the future of Spain. So I found this really interesting that he really wants to have this relationship, but at the same time is just going about it all the wrong way. And I understand how he wants to share his story, but at the same time, he's also saying, well, Franco wasn't that bad. Sure, he killed thousands of people, but the dude wasn't that bad. None of that flows. None of that works. I think of course, I said last week, guys, I think there is a place for a complex discussion about dictators and leadership and these sorts of things, how people can be a good leader can do bad things, a bad leader can do good things. Like, there is a great conversation to have there, because I think, again, that shows the complexity of who we are as human beings. But at the same time, it feels as well that it's whitewashing the past, and that's what nobody really wants either. So they have also said as well that there will only be a book. There will be no TV show. There's no multi-million-dollar deal with the global streaming platform. So I found that interesting. They're definitely trying to address, obviously the Harry and Meghan in the room. Is Juan Carlos fully going to go down the Harry and Meghan path? So I thought that was something definitely to discuss. And then there is a Spanish person on X. His name is, let me pull it up here, Jose Moreno. So if you are curious and keeping up with the Spanish and some other royal families, he is a good one to follow. And so he talks about some of this, saying Juan Carlos speaks of his relationship with his father, the Count of Barcelona, and a bond marked by the succession to the throne, in which Franco was not contributing to family harmony. Well known as relationship between Claudio and Don Juan maintained tensions that marked the history of the country, which led the dictator to bypass the natural order of succession. Franco called me into his office. I suspected nothing. He told me bluntly, I'm going to name you successor in the title of king. Will you accept? It's actually pretty crazy that the dictator could dictate who became king. That's sort of very interesting. I was stunned. I immediately thought of my father. I asked him if I had a few days to think it over, but he expected an immediate response, as dictators usually do. I was between a rock and a hard place. He looked at me fixedly. Silence reigned. Could only hear my breathing. I accepted. I mean, really, he had no other choice. As if it were a duty or an obligation, did I have any other choice? Of course, I could have preferred for my father to become Juan III and for me to inherit the crown from him, but respecting the established line of succession. But wasn't the ultimate goal to restore the monarchy in Spain? I felt overwhelmed, invaded by my feeling of guilt, but I couldn't hide my relief at having an official status. Don Juan was convinced that I knew of Franco's decision when I went to see him in Estoril, and he thought I had lied to him and betrayed him for 6 long months. He didn't speak a word to me. So that would be his father. In response to this, the king father sidesteps a part of the responsibility. He rules. After all, it was he who put me in this situation by sending me to live in Spain at the age of 10. My appointment was nothing more than a culmination of the bet he made on the future in 1948. It really is a fascinating story. I have a book that I've ordered, and the historian who wrote it, I would like to interview him. I would like to read a bit more about it, but this is one of those things where, like, this is a very complex, really interesting I keep saying interesting, really fascinating dynamics in the family. And like, it's kind of amazing how it went from dictator to king. Again, really want to explore that. So we have another bit here from Jose, who says he opened his family album for the book and showed an image of Princess Leonor alongside her cousins Victoria, Frederica, and Felipe Juan Frololian. The unpublished image that links Leonor to the grandfather king, whose divorce of his parents and certain lack of parental authority led him to a disordered life. So this is Felipe here, Felipe Juan. And to clarify for those of you who don't know, Infanta Christina's husband was convicted on like tax evasion charges and these sorts of things and literally spent time in prison. So they eventually divorced. She is actually pulled up before like the prosecutor to give a testimony. They were almost going to charge her as well. It was like a credit card that was supposed to be used for a charity. They used it for other things. So it's been a lot. So he took on some of that, obviously, parental example. So as a reminder of the ongoing reprimand from the Zarzuela palace to the then teenager who fed the chronicle of events with his hardly exemplary behavior. He went from party to party, from nightclub to nightclub, got involved in fights and bad company. He was abandoned to his fate. What a waste. It saddened me greatly. A situation that directly affected Florian, though it also affected the king himself, who, like any grandfather, suffered through seeing him sink, a crisis that many teenagers go through. He was an easy target for gossip aficionados. He was hounded by the paparazzi, yada, yada, yada. So I guess Felipe took the matter into his own hands and said, my son summoned him to the palace to reprimand him. Then I proposed he come to settle in Abu Dhabi, where I could help him find work and lodging. He didn't accept right away. He took some time to reflect, spent the New Year's holiday in Spain, and then he had the courage to take the step to move out with his grandfather. So I first took him into my home before he moved to the studio in the city without my asking. The first morning, he got up at 7 to join me at breakfast. I know that was more like the hour he used to go to bed in Spain. And on top of that, time difference was against him. Then he followed me in my sports training. A single day, he adapted to a healthy and orderly life. He started doing sports and dieting. So I think this is him right here. So this is Princess Leonor, the future queen, her little sister, Infanta Sofia, their father, King Felipe, and then Juan Carlos and Queen Sofia. And then this is, I think, Frederica is one of her names. Victoria Frederica? Eugenie Frederica? Can't quite remember. So anyways, another little bit here. Again, hopefully y'all are enjoying this because I just do find this all very revealing about a conflicted royal family. And then he talks about Queen Letizia, Juan Carlos does, who he still does not like. He says, I repeated to her time and again, the door to my office will always be open to you. Come whenever you want, but she never came. I don't blame her. I want to be clear here. I don't blame Letizia at all for not really wanting to associate with her father-in-law too much and for probably kind of keeping her daughter's distance from them. Furthermore, he has highlighted the figure of the queen distance Felipe from his sisters, from himself, and from Sofia, even from his childhood friends. Now, childhood friends that I don't know so much about, but again, himself, Sofia, and the sisters all engaged in various levels of scandal. They're all involved in scandals. So it's kind of smart not to really associate with them. So he says, both are very elegant and affectionate about Leonor and Sofia, but it saddened me to not be able to establish a personal relationship with them, to tell them stories, share meals in restaurants, trips, take them to see matches, as I did with my other grandchildren. He recounts my wife, Sofia, was never able to receive them alone in Palma, and as she usually does with all her cousins. She saw them occasionally, but she would have loved to do it more often, especially since they lived just 100 meters away. She would have liked to pass on to them genealogy, the history, and the values of our family, and some advice from an emeritus queen with an impeccable track record to a future queen. Like if she had an impeccable track record, I'm sorry, her husband would not be involved in such scandals. In the words of Queen Sofia, attributing the distance to the current Queen of Spain, King Felipe once again highlights a personal disagreement, Juan Carlos says, highlights a personal disagreement with Queen Letizia. It did not contribute to the cohesion of our relationships. Again, I would argue that Letizia was very smart here. Spain would not have survived if Felipe was deeply involved with his parents and what they were doing. The Spanish monarchy would have probably been voted out. Like Felipe, in his own way, with Letizia's help, I think, saved the Spanish monarchy. Now, again, some people will allege that Letizia is sort of the Meghan Markle of Spain. I vehemently disagree with that assertion because obviously the British royal family, yes, they have their issues. Of course, what family doesn't? But they were broadly very functional. They seemed like a tight, cohesive unit. And yes, Andrew was doing his things on the side, but it wasn't really affecting the main family and these sorts of things. Yes, Charles had an affair, but so did obviously William's mother. And so as far as we're aware, though, like within the main factors of the family, everybody was very solid, had very loving relationships, very good dynamics, these sorts of things. But when you have Spain, the king didn't abdicate for health reasons. He abdicated because he fell off something in Botswana, broke his hip, and was hunting with his mistress. That's why he lost the throne. Let's be clear. So, I would once again argue that he's a little bit delusional and it just doesn't bode particularly well. And I think Letizia was very smart. Even though he goes, "My office door is always open." She's like, "No, I'm good. I'm good. I don't want to talk to you." And I say good for her. Be smart. Be smart. Don't go down this path because I think if they had too closely associated with him, they'd be wrapped up in everything too. So that would be my thought. So now let's move on to Mariusborg Homeby. So obviously, son of Norway's crown princess, who is currently facing 32 criminal charges. Looks like Draco Malfoy, as many people have stated, which is somewhat true. And let's go ahead and go down because the interesting question that people are raising is who is paying the bills for his case? And that is a question. So there is some doubt as to who that is. So a book that they're trying to release in Norway, but my understanding is has been somewhat blocked, is White Stripes Black Sheep, talking about Marius and his cases and everything. And they're trying to have a temporary injunction against the publisher to prevent the sale of the book. According to his lawyers, it contains serious insults and false allegations about Marius. I don't think they're probably not that maybe everything is right, but I imagine some of it is probably right. Whether that is true or not is unknown. What is certain, however, is that it will cost a lot of money to bring in the case against the publisher. And the question is, where does the money come from? Is the topic of discussion. The case has been heard in Oslo's district court and probably already know that such legal bills are not particularly cheap. During police investigations, Marius had explained that he has no income but lives on a fixed transfer of 20,000 kroner per month from his parents. So, mommy and daddy are funding the lifestyle. Let's see how much that is. Norwegian kroner to USD. So just to be clear here, the way the money works is how they show the money is different. So it's not $22,000. So it's $2,100. So $2,181 at current exchange rate is how much he gets per month. Quite a good little bit there. And this makes CO Court question how the bill is related to Marius's finances. The media has asked the Norwegian royal family to state whether the royal family or the crown prince couple will pay the expenses. Neither the court nor the crown prince couple will pay the expenses, said the head of communications. And they've also been in contact with Renee Ibsen, one of the lawyers representing Marius. He does not want to disclose the specific amount, but answers who they are sending the bill to. We have an agreement with Marius and no one else. He is the one who receives our payment demands, and no one else is responsible for paying it. And so I find that to be like, obviously, it's something that is deeply concerning. Who is paying? And I didn't even think about this before. Who's paying for this guy's defense? Is the royal family, and by like extension, somewhat the taxpayers paying for this guy's defense? Like, that's seriously like, wow. The Norwegian monarchy works a bit differently, but I just can't help but imagine his parents have to be paying for his legal bills. He doesn't have that much money to be paying for his own legal bills. So obviously, again, really problematic. Looks really bad for the Norwegian monarchy, but sadly, not very surprised. So we do also have another case. This is from King Frederick. Now, this is not a picture of them together in terms of that they posed for this picture. They have been spliced together, but it was reported back in November of 2023 that Crown Prince Frederick had been seen with this woman who was named Giovanna Casanova. And they had a night out on Madrid. According to reports, he initially was supposed to be out with his friend and her. And then the friend dropped out. And reportedly that he spent the night at her place. And at the time, obviously, a lot of insinuations were made. He's spending the night at a woman's house who is not his wife. Are they having an affair? That was a big question. $32,000 question. That was it. So there were no confirmations that that is what happened. However, people were obviously pretty concerned, and the palace has denied it, saying she denies it. So she has denied, saying, I deny categorically statements suggesting a romantic relationship between Crown Prince Frederick and me. That's his title at the time. And the palace says we do not make any comments about like this stuff. They're like, we're not engaging in this. But now she is going to be suing the publication, demanding 1 million euros, who originally broke the story, and have said basically that they have violated her privacy, that they have damaged her reputation. So she is suing them now for 1 million euros. So that is the latest in that case there. So we will keep an eye on that to see sort of where that goes. I don't have, let's say, strong thoughts, but it is interesting. Again, it goes back to what we talked about with Beatrice and Eugenie. Let's say everything Frederick did with that woman was on the up and up. He stayed in the guest room, like they're friends, whatever. Doesn't matter. He went to a woman's home, a single woman's home by himself and spent the night. Doesn't matter what they did or didn't do. The optics are bad. That's the thing. The optics are bad. So in that case, like, you can 100% read insinuations into that. Like, I don't care if it destroyed her reputation or not. She should have told him to go find a hotel. He's a future king. He had money. He should have gone and stayed at the hotel. Appearances do matter. And so that is something he's going to pay for. So we'll do this real quick, and then we have 2 little videos. So I was like looking for stories, and I found this one to be a great sort of discussion piece. Obviously, we're not going to do a huge discussion here, but it's Princess Esmeralda of Belgium. And so she's sort of tenuously tied to the throne. And so she was going to do a conference in Sao Paulo for kind of around COP or whatever. But the conference that she was going to help sort of, I think, lead got canceled because of her family ties to King Leopold II, who enacted cruel policies of colonialism, particularly in Congo. And she sort of is like, okay, I understand, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not responsible for obviously what my ancestor did. So she tells us, so this is a point of view. I was supposed to participate in a conversation with the great Brazilian photographer Joe Farkas. We were to discuss my father's photographs and the exhibition we held, as well as the film Amazonia, Heart of Mother Earth, co-directed and co-produced by Gert Peter Brunch. But the princess, known for her commitment to the planet, human rights, and indigenous peoples, did not get the opportunity. So I found out this day before the conference that it had been canceled. It was a real shock, she told us. And so it was because of the Congolese. She also attended the Earthshot Prize. So there she is at the Earthshot Prize there. She said, we are not responsible for our ancestors. Besides, Leopold II isn't even a direct ancestor since he's my great uncle. She never experienced the situations which she considers unjust. So much so that she doesn't understand why she was targeted, given that she has always firmly condemned these atrocities. For years in my lectures and articles, I've explained that the Belgian colonial period is one of the most violent and terrible of all European colonizations. I believe it is essential to apologize to all those countries that suffered physical and moral harm. So I was really, really like intrigued by this notion because yeah, they're not responsible for their ancestors. If we are all responsible for our ancestors, like that would be insane. But that she was sort of canceled gives me concern that people will unnecessarily punish those who had a very tenuous connection to something that happened hundreds of years ago. You had nothing to do with what happened hundreds of years ago. That was your ancestor. Like, how are you supposed to apologize? You weren't even there. You weren't even born. You weren't even a speck in the eye of your great great grandparents or whatever. So that is like a little bit of something that I'm like, huh, okay, okay. So let's move on to let's say something a little bit funner here. So Catherine is sharing with a World War II veteran, Prince George, and his particular fascination with like fixed wing, fixed winged airplanes and these sorts of things. I think I'm sharing that correctly. And she wanted to share. So you might have to turn your volume up a little bit, but let's take a little listen here. And you can tell he is very excited to hear about what George likes.
George very much likes making these air-fixed models. He's a big fan of making the Lancaster bomber. So he knows more about the aircraft than I do. He should have done. He would have had all sorts of technical questions about the aircraft.
So I love that little bit of interaction there. And I did have somebody on X though go, oh, why does this guy want to hear about, her son's interest in model airplanes? I'm like, the guy loved it. He flew in those things. And I think people lack the understanding, especially those who don't hang around much with the older people or don't have much of a connection to history. These people, he wants to share about his time. He wants people to remember. And George's process of building a model airplane on the Lancaster bomber is his process of remembering there. So I just thought that was quite sweet. And then I did want to share. So this is the Booker Prize, and they're having a reception at Clarence House. And we have Sarah Jessica Parker here doing quite the lovely little greeting to Queen Camilla.
Sarah Jessica Parker, I love you to meet you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
One of your many hats.
Perhaps my most wonderful, exciting authors. So it was a bit of agony sometimes to let books go.
So I love that Sarah did a curtsy and she bowed her head. She did both. Like she did it very formally. I've always been of the opinion as an American, I am like, if I was invited to the Royal Palace, that would be awesome, but I probably wouldn't curtsy just because I'm not a citizen of that country. And so I just haven't really done anything like that or would do something like that. But I just thought it was very fascinating that Sarah did it. She was obviously like very impressed and a little bit in awe. This was held at Clarence House. And I think it goes to show, again, something I say all the time, that when it comes to royalty, royals are something to Hollywood that is sort of, they are in awe of it a little bit. And they're in awe of it because it's something that they can't achieve. You either are, no matter how many Oscars you win, Emmys, Golden Globes, how many accolades you get, whatever, you can't be royalty unless you're born to it or you marry into it. Those are the only two ways. And now that I'm saying that, I just realized there is also an article in the Times of London with Lady Frederick Windsor, Sophie. And so if you're interested in that, she is actually in Hollywood and she is somebody who obviously has this relationship with the royal family, yet also lived in Hollywood for 7 or 8 years. So she has a perspective that she can offer and proves as well that you can be a royal and also be part of Hollywood. And again, if Meghan Markle had played her cards right, she might be in a great spot right now instead of sort of the laughingstock of the industry and getting more and more irrelevant sort of as the days go on. So anyways, guys, that wraps up our main pieces of the Crown Report here. We did have some super chats come in. We had Diz Fan who said, Would this be a cause of concern for King Charles and Prince William, especially if Beatrice is repeating the same role as Andrew? So number one, and I should have specified this in talking about Beatrice, is Beatrice can't have the same role as Andrew because Andrew's role was officially given to him and Beatrice is just being a businesswoman. So you have that big distinction there between the two. And so because Andrew was a special trade ambassador, so he could go, or special trade envoy. So he could go to countries and help facilitate deals with Britain overall. Beatrice can't really do that because she's not a special trade ambassador. She's not traveling with like official representatives of the United Kingdom. She's doing that on her own. So that's very, very different. And so again, that's not a concern. However, from a, let's say, an outsider's perspective, I understand how, given all the flack her family is getting, that she does have to approach things a little bit carefully for now and not seemingly like she's doing things with her title that she shouldn't be doing. DS, thank you so much for the super chat as well, says, I wonder how Prince William will react about Bill Gates change of view on Doomsday View regarding climate change. Probably a good idea for him to stay out of it. So I haven't read too much about Bill Gates's perspective, but yes, there is, I think, a way to be concerned about, let's say, aspects of, overfishing, poaching, these sorts of things, and being concerned about deforestation and various issues, but not going, let's say, too hard on it, because at least some of the perspectives I see, people want to just basically like destroy the infrastructure of the world to kind of address climate issues. And it comes very much from a like the perspective of people, in my opinion, how they see it is that like they have to change it. If they don't do anything now, oh my gosh, everything's gonna fall apart. And I think the earth is much better than that. So I don't think they need to worry too much. And it did remind me, I did see something about Prince William that I wanted to add here too, is that he did an interview where he talked about how obviously the kids don't have any cell phones, but most likely George will get one without the internet when he goes to secondary school, which should be next year, if I remember correctly. And then that he does a lot of the school runs, they participate in a lot of activities with the kids. And that, of course, is always good to see. We do have Jill C, who became a YouTube member. Why, thank you so much. Jill, I hope you enjoy it. And then we also have Carol. Oh, wow. Crimea River. I sacrificed myself for the Spanish throne while committing financial corruption. Yeah. Yep. Yep. That is Juan Carlos. That is Juan Carlos. So, yep. It was really quite sad. It's really quite sad. Because he does have something I think really, really interesting to offer in terms of this transition with Francisco Franco. Like there could be, and his relationship with him, there could be so many interesting things that we could glean. But at the same time, it's like, oh, woe is me. I tried so hard and nobody gives me the time of day anymore. Unlike this poor old man on this island in Abu Dhabi where somebody, pays my bills and I have like this massive property or something, whatever. You get my drift. Oh, Lizzie B, thank you so much for the super sticker. That is so sweet of you. And then we also have Dr. M as well, gifted one Royal News Network membership. So that is so awesome. I hope somebody is able to really, really enjoy that. All right. So I did see one of the things up here, which I thought was kind of interesting, because again, this goes into a discussion that we've seen sort of a lot over the years. And I've explained it, and it's always worth, like, I think going over again, but I don't see it right now. But it was a conversation about the BBC, I guess, apparently referring to Catherine as Kate Middleton for most of their coverage. And so I have explained this, but it's worthwhile explaining again that the BBC and others do this for, even if it's in a broadcaster report, for SEO reasons. And that's sort of how lay people sort of remember Catherine, is as Kate Middleton. That is unfortunate. Obviously, the BBC, because the Times of London and the Telegraph always use the titles. They're very particular about that. Most other publications do not. And the reason is for recognition online and these sorts of things and how people understand them. So I know that's not the answer most people want to hear, but that's sort of kind of the the reality of the situation. So Polished Needle says Leonore has the best role model in her grandmother. She should look up to her. Eh. So she has some really interesting factors. Obviously, Mary Lou Poli says Queen Sophia is the only royal left who is related to all European houses, the Habsburgs, Hanover, Battenberg, etc. Sophia speaks many languages, mainly German, French, Greek, and English. So obviously, Leonore speaks English. We know that because she went to Wales for school. And obviously Spanish as well. But I do think Sophia maybe has a little bit of that, let's say, entitlement, being somebody who is so titled and well connected in many ways. And it's one of those things where I think because Juan Carlos is so bad, she is seen as so good. But I think that the situation is a bit more nuanced. Shaz says exactly, and then we wonder where the likes of Andrew and Harry get their crap behavior, seeing men like those two are. Yeah. Mary Lou says Sophia barely speaks Spanish, but had earned the love of the Spanish people. She did. Rose said Don Juan, a nickname for men with many affairs in Spanish. Don Juan was a Don Juan. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. So Teresa says, did you actually read the article? Or are you taking the side of the media with the headline? You know what it is that the media does. No, I don't know which one you're talking about, but I would guess could be William. It could be something else. I'm not sure. But I always say, guys, I always have my own opinions on things. Yes, I read what the media says, but I also go by what makes sense, what's logical, what works within the royal system, what doesn't work within the royal system. There are a variety of factors that I consider. Beverly says, very good. Interesting. Princess Goose says, after what the BBC did, I don't trust the news media anymore. Yes, especially with what they did to Donald Trump, editing his speech in particular ways. And then they criticized the presenter, basically, who was reading the headline and it said pregnant people. And she goes, women. Respect her for that. Mad respect. Mary Lou says Juan Carlos was a good king until he became very, very crooked. Also, he humiliated Sophia with his hundreds of mistresses and verbal abuse. He has great charisma and super handsome, the Bourbons. Yes. Sir Squirrel a lot says, sorry, late. I like Princess Leonore. She seems very together. Left her duty on sailing trip. Hope the other younger royals will commit such solid background for service. Lady Louise seems to be doing the same. And yes, Lady Louise was also seen at the cenotaph. She was marching with her unit. So I thought that was kind of cool. She does like sort of an ROTC thing at college. Mary Lou says the Bourbon kings are no good. Letizia is Felipe's beard. It is known in Spain that Felipe and Albert of Monaco were an item. Letizia is a horrible worse than Meghan Markle. I just really don't think so. And I don't think that's true either with Albert and Felipe. That's funny though. That is funny. The way Felipe looks at Letizia, I don't really believe any of that. Albert, though, that is a question. That is a definite question. Given how horrible his relationship with Charlene has gone, don't think it's very good. Gimlet I says, I think we're being premature on the York girls. Word is that they are dirty as their parents. I'm not saying they are, that we should wait and see before taking any direction. But like anyone, it's innocent until proven guilty. And sometimes suspicions aren't always all that productive in some ways. Rose Mack says, Norwegian people get money from the government because it's such a rich country. My relatives lived there for a while. Many young people are lazy because of the welfare money. That is true. So yeah, he could have some built up, but I would imagine mommy and daddy are helping a little bit. Maggie Becker says, I'm so late. I'll have to catch the first part on replay. So Sir Squirrelot says, sorry if this wasn't covered, and it wasn't. If Meghan Markle's holiday show airs December 3rd, it really does not conflict with Christmas concert from Catherine, since it is taped to be shown just before Christmas. Yes, and the event is always held, or at least so far has always been held on a Friday. So was like, because they pre-tape it, I would imagine would be on that Friday or the next Friday. And also, what is actually really funny is that is the first day of the German state visit. Now, usually what happens on the first day of every state visit is the state banquet. Now, maybe I should do a whole video on this. I don't know. But I'm really hoping that Catherine can totally destroy Meghan by just putting a different tiara on that day. If she puts the Persian turquoise tiara on, I'll be like, yeah, that'd be really funny. But yeah, and well, the second season of Meghan's show, which was kind of like the, let's say, confirmation of if the premise worked or not, like completely and totally bombed. So that show ain't going anywhere. Like the holiday special and the table Meghan displayed for that holiday special is so lame. It didn't even look that good. It looked like she basically threw on some pine cones or something, or like some greenery, and that was it. Like none of it looked particularly artful or artsy or anything. So I don't think anybody's sitting there going, yes, I need Meghan Markle to help me figure out how to decorate for Christmas. No. And she still calls it the holiday. Coastal Angel says if she sues, then she'll have to prove it was a lie. She'll have to be innocent to open herself up for that. So I don't know this. So this is a case regarding the woman who some people inference maybe had an affair with Crown Prince Frederick, but the challenge is other legal systems work differently. That might be the case in the States, but I'm not sure if that's the case, what she has to prove in European courts. That I'm not sure about. So Squirrelot says it was stupid, very careless move on his part, entitled. Yes, it was 100%. Oh, Carol gave a super chat here, said Lady Louise wasn't marching at the Cenotaph. She was marching in Scotland. Why, thank you. Yes, she does, I think, a great job. It's so nice to see, especially a young royal lady who doesn't have to do that, or decide to go ahead and do that. So I just thought that was very, very sweet. So Mary Lou says Giovanna Casanova is a rich, gorgeous socialite previously married to the Duke de la Palma, and it said that after the incident with Frederick, Queen Marguerite abdicated for her son. So that's not true. I think Queen Marguerite had already decided to do that because I think she stripped the titles from her younger children earlier that year. And this kind of dumb idea that has been like spread around that somehow, in order to avoid them divorcing, Queen Marguerite abdicated to force their marriage together or something and keep Mary around just doesn't make a ton of sense, in my opinion. So I just think she wanted to be done. I think she was tired. It's like she's had health issues and stuff. So she did, though, not tell her son until like 3 days before. So she had been like slowly building this and not telling anybody, which is kind of epic. She just says the BBC was so disrespectful to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, calling her Kate Middleton throughout. Again, I understand why people do that. Mary Lou says Queen Margaret abdicated after the Giovanna incident. Yes. Sir Squirrelot asked, didn't SJP live in several years in England? Maybe she feels a connection. Perhaps. And she also very famously, I think it was a premiere of Sex and the City in London, she very famously wore a Philip Tracy hat. So that was, she did make one little, like there was a little comment about a hat, and I think that's it. So Coastal Angel says, think it's rude not to when you're meeting the royal family. If that's the case, you can't complain about Meghan's mock curtsy. No, because at the time, there's a difference there. So as an American, the king or queen is not my head of state. So I show them respect and deference, but I don't curtsy to them. They're not my head of state. I am not part of their government. I am not led by them, so I feel no obligation to do so. However, Meghan Markle greeting the queen is different because her and Harry at that point were already considering kind of marriage and furthering relationship or whatever. Like when you meet the queen and you are dating a royal partner, that means you're on the route to be part of the family, and curtsying is required for that. So very different situations. If I'm randomly meeting a royal at an event or something, I don't curtsy. But if I was going to be marrying into the royal family, yes, I would curtsy. Very big difference. Deep Thought said, absolutely bowing and curtsying is for people in the UK and the 14 realms of the king. Only those from other countries are definitely not expected by anyone to do so. Yes, I agree. Like it would be crazy for, I mean, I think in the days past it would happen, but I think it would be crazy for anybody to expect an American to do a deep curtsy or something to the king or queen. Like if you want to do that, bravo to you, more power to you, but it's not required. Elizabeth says, I feel for Beatrice and Eugenie. They are not their parents. No, they are not. They're definitely not. So Millennial for Christ says, I'm a patriotic American and I would still curtsy out of respect to the royals because it is a cool experience, though King Charles isn't a fave of mine doing too soft on the Muslim rise and regarding Harry and Meghan. So yes, again, I think it's to each their own. Everybody is able to do it. And I think that was like, that's a great way to look at it. And if it's like, it would be a cool experience, yes, to do it once. I think that would be cool. To Queen Elizabeth, I would have curtsied. Rose Max says, when my daughter was in middle school, a classmate told her she was a phoneless because she did not have a phone. Oh, man. Elizabeth says, YouTube is so strange. It goes from my original name to my new one. Yeah, and this is run through a place called StreamYard. And so it helps me pull in the comments and stuff because usually initially I would just read them off the side from YouTube as they were going. So this allows me to pull them in and do a couple other things. So it is a nice way. Deep thought, SEO isn't applicable when it's spoken commentary on live TV, which the BBC was being criticized for. Yes, but at the same time, obviously most people know her as Kate Middleton. That's just the reality of life. Elizabeth says, which princess has to wear flat shoes? Sorry, not up on the Spanish monarchy. So Queen Letizia generally wears flats because of issues with her feet, or at least low heels. And yeah. Dr. M says, I've noticed that all the recent coverage of Harry and Meghan refer to her as Meghan Markle. Guess the press forgot that she's Sussex now. Most of the press always refer to her as Meghan Markle. Again, I only really see the Duchess of Sussex used like consistently in, let's say, the Times and the Telegraph, sometimes the Daily Mail. Sometimes you use Duchess of Sussex like when you're writing. So you could say Meghan, 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 but to mix it up, you could say Meghan, and then later you say Duchess of Sussex, and then you say Meghan again, then later Duchess of Sussex. It allows you to mix up your language. Abertasa says, hi, Brittany and Miss Pippa. Hi, everyone. I've missed the live again, This America, but I'm happy to be here with you all for the questions. So this is how you do it. It says, makes no sense. They managed to refer to Camilla as queen, even though she's not been known as Camilla since the 1980s. Actually, technically the 2000s. It was the air commentator said Kate and Queen. Why not the Prince of Wales and Queen? So very simply, Queen is a lot easier to say. It's not super complicated. Queen Camilla is very easy. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, it's a mouthful. Kate Middleton is much easier. That's a factor too. And even when it comes to titles, I cannot put Catherine the Princess of Wales in a freaking YouTube title. It's too many characters. Way too many characters. I'll say Princess Catherine or Princess Kate. And I used to say Kate Middleton and I got a lot of flack for it. And I stopped doing it just because people were really annoying about it. Yeah. So it is just though, like, because I have character limits in YouTube. I have 100 characters. And every single word in a title is important because I title my things based on SEO. So every single word in there is something I hope catches the algorithm. And so, yeah, when it comes to simplicity, simple of like simple exchange of ideas and these sorts of things, simple like talking, doing the Princess of Wales and the Queen versus just Kate and the Queen, just easier. I hate to say it, and I know people want to be super complicated about it, but it's not that complicated. And it's, yes, people don't like it, but that's what it is. People are simple. They keep things simple. You know, news is written on an 8th grade level. So Daphne says in Arab countries, the extended family is very important, so royalty would count there. Beatrice may be able to represent British interests and benefit the country. That is possible. That is possible. Susan said she said it was coming out in November. Now magically moved the exact dates to the German state visit. No accident. Yeah, but it kind of kills Meghan's show too, because there's nothing bigger than seeing somebody in a tiara. Like I do whole tiara watch parties. It like dominates the internet. Like when Catherine went in that gown last time, that was all of Twitter, and nobody watches Meghan's show. So I think Netflix sort of hates Meghan, and so maybe that's why they did it. But Meghan maybe didn't know, and like she was guessing November, but then they switched it on her. That's also possible. Jill C says William called her Kate last year in an interview. Yes, so he has called her Kate too. And again, people are just simple. People like nicknames. And British titles are complicated too. So she's not Princess Catherine or Princess Kate. She is Catherine, the capital Princess of Wales. And so it's very different than Sweden. So when Sophia married into the royal family, she just became Princess Sophia. She technically does have a dukedom, but it's like that's attached to her husband. So she can use the Duchess of whatever her husband's dukedom is. But like it's just Princess Sophia. Mary, it was Crown Princess Mary. It's just a little bit more complicated in the UK. Like it used to be Catherine the Duchess of Cambridge. That's too long for a title. It's really long. So it's just comes down to spacing issues sometimes. You don't make things too long. And yes, people hate those reasonings, but that's sort of the reality of it. Lizzie B says, I think Queen Marguerite was already planning for many years, and lately her back problems were not helping, and she decided to abdicate in order to enjoy her retirement. Yeah, I think she just came to that conclusion, and I think she didn't want her son to get too excited about her, or maybe even her daughter-in-law, so she kept it a secret. Shaz says, William has not called her Kate since their engagement interview. I'm sure he probably has. I'm sure he has. So Elizabeth says, did you believe the affair rumors regarding Mary and Frederick? Now, I've heard over the years that they've had issues in their relationship, but I don't know. I have no idea. However, I will say it looked bad. Regardless of whatever happened, it looked bad. Susan said Meghan Markle not only mocked the curtsy, but compared it to whole medieval times. Such trash. Yeah, it's sort of that too. So Lynn Gideon says the York girls will have to live their lives above reproach because of their parents, unfortunately. Yes, very true. They'll have to even do more. Leslie says, when is the German state visit? December 3rd through the 5th. Usually the 3rd is the first day. That's when they do kind of the whole official greeting and then the banquet in the evening. And then the second day is more individual engagements. So Dr. M says the Persian turquoise tiara is gorgeous. Yes, guys, we'll wrap up here in a little second, but yes, it's gorgeous. So, Princess Goose says, what is SEO? Search engine optimization. So when it comes to how you put things into the algorithm, the words you use really matter because you have to be like, I've been told once YouTube is Google for video. So I title things as if they're articles so that they get traction. It's just kind of how it works. So sometimes I hate these sort of having to put the Crown Report episode 8 in something because it takes up too many characters and I don't have enough time to like really write out a full thing for each one. And that's frustrating. Yeah, Elizabeth says, yes, the algorithm is why Kate Middleton has big back. Yes, because Catherine compared to Diana and Sophie is Catherine grew up or sort of rose to prominence in the public eye in the heyday of the internet or the beginnings of the internet. So every single article was titled Kate Middleton, Kate Middleton, Kate Middleton, Kate Middleton. And that's how people came to know her as. So you don't just have a paper, which is easy to change because everybody follows the same editorial standards, is that you have the internet itself, which is this movable sort of like kind of beast. And it kind of moves around and it's always changing and stuff like that. But once something gets into the system as Kate Middleton, it just kind of keeps going in that direction. People still call Diana Lady Di sometimes and these sorts of things. And she was known for as Kate Middleton for so long before marrying that it also stuck. So because she was publicly known as Kate Middleton for almost a decade. And so when you have something like that, people just kind of that's what like if people ask me about the royal family, they go, how's Kate Middleton? They almost never say Princess of Wales, guys. They like never do. Even if you put in right now, let me see if it still works this way. So if I put in so let's put it here and it gives you guys again a bit of an example of how this works. So if I put into Getty Images right now, Princess of Wales, the first 4 pictures are Diana still. Now this is it's called Best Match, but it is still a lot of Diana because she was known on the internet as the Princess of Wales long before Catherine was. So You know, Diana, it's a mixture of Catherine and Diana, the Princess of Wales. So that's just, it's slowly changing, but she was sort of kind of the well-known publicly on the internet as the Princess of Wales first. So that's just, again, kind of the reality of stuff. So Deep Thought said, SEO is not applicable for commentary on live broadcast event. No excuse to call her Kate. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just people know her as Kate, though. I'm sorry. That's just it. So we do have Gretchen here who says, the problem for Catherine is that during the engagement interview, even William called her Kate. That's pretty much set the algorithm. Very true. They tried to change it to Catherine and just never took. Deep Thought that Catherine says you want to be called Catherine. It's a matter of respect. How would you like to be called Brianna instead of Brittany? Name that isn't even yours. Well, Brianna isn't really even a nickname for Brittany. If people call me Brit, I don't care. And unfortunately, again, it's not about people not respecting her. It's about how people know her as. That's just it. I'm sorry, but that's just the case. And so they tried at the beginning of their marriage to get people to call her Catherine. It never stuck. It never, ever stuck. Don't know if it ever will stick. Yeah, so that's just it. Coastal Angel says, what is your chair you wish to see? Persian turquoise, 150%. 150%. So that is what we want to, that's what we want to see for sure. For sure. It's too old to care, says Brittany. I think that's old. If everyone started calling her Princess Catherine, it would work. Guys, again, news media, they're thinking about the algorithms. They don't really care what she wants to be called. They don't really. It's all about making sure their stuff gets in front of people. That's how they make their money, guys. That's just it. So Deep Thought says, your argument is flawed, Brittany. Read the chat telling you SEO is irrelevant for spoken words in live broadcasts. Well, actually, believe it or not, YouTube does calculate actually what you say in the first minute. I heard from YouTube, like in the first minute, you usually actually want to use the words that are in your title because, again, Google is comparing the words you see in your title to what is on your thumbnail in your video. So yeah, people don't like that, guys, but that is the reality. It's not what you want it to be, but what it is. Again, any layperson who asks about the royal family asks, how is Kate Middleton? That is always how she's referred to me as for people who don't watch royals that closely. And so that is how the broader world knows her. And so the news media will keep using that until she's queen. And it still might be Queen Kate. I don't know. Probably be Queen Catherine. But yeah. Shaz says they called her Weighty Katie Brittany. And every time they call her Kate, has pushback to then. True. But again, that was, I mean, it was Catherine Middleton, but Catherine was her name. So, P Pacific says, Brittany, as an aside, I recommend a search for photos regarding Denmark's Queen Margret's coffin, all designed by her. You'd be amazed. I love her work. Takes a lot. She is amazing. Like, she's very, very creative. I love it. I love how creative she is. Elizabeth says, Miss Brittany, when Catherine is queen of the UK, will they still call her by her SEO? I think it might change then, because the problem too is you had the issue of changing titles, which doesn't help things either. So I think things will fully change when she's queen. But again, I'm not totally sure. I'm not totally sure. I think the Americans will still probably say Kate Middleton. But yeah. Yep. So that is it for this video today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. These are always so fun. I do have to get the printed Crumb Report version out, but that'll probably be tomorrow. So that goes over all the royal news. I have most of it done, but I still have a couple countries to kind of finish up. So particularly Monaco. So we will get there tomorrow, guys. But thank you so much again. More coming soon, and I will speak to you guys later. All right. Bye.